York Times reports this, quote, Ms. Harris is now garnering extensive media attention and drowning out Mr. Trump. People close to him have acknowledged that such a circumstance usually prompts him to try to insert himself into the news cycle somehow, often in self-destructive ways. Quote, I think there's a real chance that he overplays his hand on the attacks on her, said Lauren Leader, the founder of All In Together and an advocate for advancing women in business and politics. Quote, I don't think it's strategic for him. I think it's automatic. Again, it's quite simple. Donald Trump and the cult of personality he's built up prove again and again that they can be simply weird. It's where we start the hour. Joining us today, activist and founder of All In Together, the aforementioned Lauren Leader is here. Also joining us, former White House communications director, host of the Open Book podcast, Anthony Scaramucci is back with us. Anthony, I start with you. We've been in touch over the summer as this Democratic contest has taken the country on a roller coaster. As someone who's sort of on the ground with the donor community and the Republicans in exile community drawn to this pro-democracy ticket, tell me how the last 4 days have felt.
I mean, I think they've been very strong. I love the slogan, "We choose freedom." I just want you to think about that from a Braveheart context. And it's such a great rebuttal to make America great again. The notion of freedom having some civil rights context as well. But I just want to go back, if you don't mind, to what you were saying earlier about this guy, JD Vance. So he doesn't believe in the democracy. So he's an acolyte of Curtis Yarvin. I would ask you please to look him up, study him. JD Vance and his group of people philosophically believe that the average American's not equipped to run the country anymore. It should no longer be a democracy, but it should be run by elites like JD Vance and the minions, maybe venture capitalists and things like that. And so we have to peel that back very hard in this election, explain to people that's how JD Vance feels about things. Donald Trump didn't vet JD Vance. I'm telling you, he's miserable at his side right now. But that's why he's telling you that the votes don't matter. You know, and that if you don't have kids, the votes don't matter. He wants to separate us from each other, and he wants his team to run things on their own in a post-constitutional America.
You know, Lauren, you're quoted in this piece that we read from, and even since the Times reported that, there's this the contrast is really this viral and visceral reaction to what Anthony's talking about, to JD Vance and this weird and cultish, I don't even know if we call it intellectual underpinning, but I'll use that for the purposes of this conversation. Yeah, weird. But speak to that, and speak to the response and the reaction and the recoiling, frankly, to it.
Yeah, I think weird is probably generous. I mean, I think you have to sort of look at the context of this too, and who JD Vance was trying to appeal to, especially in a conversation with Tucker Carlson. A lot of the right-wing extremist groups that have been sort of at the heart of this Trump coalition, folks that showed up at the Capitol on January 6th, the Proud Boys and Unite the Right, and many of these, extremist right-wing white nationalist groups have a deeply misogynistic core set of beliefs that organize and animate what they do. And it's been so extreme and so embedded that even the Anti-Defamation League, which typically just tracks anti-Semitism, launched a misogyny tracker a few years ago because it was becoming so prevalent. So Vance has been very specifically courting this group of, white male supporters who fundamentally don't believe that women should have a full and equal place in American society. They talk about potentially, repealing the 19th Amendment, which gave the women the right to vote. And so in many ways, this stuff that's coming out about him, I'm not especially surprised. What I think is extraordinary is the power of the backlash, which is very real. And by the way, very bipartisan. If you want to talk about struggles with fertility, women who've not all women are childless by choice. Some are, and they should be given that, celebrated for the choices they can make. But there are also millions of women who have fertility challenges, who've lost babies, and now in states that have abortion bans, women who've been rendered infertile because they couldn't access the health care they needed when they had had a miscarriage. So like the levels of outrage that have been triggered here are real and deep, but warranted. And it's the beginning. You know, we're day 4 of this campaign. We are barely scratching the surface of the misogyny that is going to emerge.
Lauren, let me read something that Jennifer Aniston said that tracks with what you're talking about, IVF and the choices that women make and sometimes don't make. She wrote this, quote, "I truly can't believe this is coming from a potential vice president of the United States," Jennifer Aniston wrote Wednesday in an Instagram story, including a clip of Vance's comments. "All I can say is, Mr. Vance, I pray that your daughter is fortunate enough to bear children of her own one day," Aniston wrote. "I hope she will not need to turn to IVF as a second option because you were trying to take that away from her too. I was going through IVF, drinking Chinese teas, you name it," she said. "I was throwing everything at it. I would have given anything if someone had said to me, freeze your eggs, do yourself a favor. You just don't think it. So here I am today. That ship has sailed." This attack on IVF and on women who either by choice or by circumstances like what Jennifer Aniston articulates is, Lauren, as you're describing, it's not just universal, it's not just something that has no party affiliation. It's galvanizing. I think for many women, this becomes a traumatic experience and a deeply personal one, and sort of kicking that bruise, kicking that trauma it's immoral and distasteful. It's also politically idiotic.
Well, it's absolutely politically idiotic. And, you know, what's interesting is, of course, that Republicans really stayed away from abortion politics at the convention, which is remarkable. And you talked about it on your show. I mean, it's, abortion was the animating principle of Republican politics for 50 years, and suddenly you had a convention where it barely was mentioned, if at all. And the reason is because Republicans have come to understand how radioactive that is for a huge coalition, a very broad swath of American women. And I think the IVF and fertility conversation is another one of those just absolutely visceral, kind of hit you in the gut, uniting issues for women everywhere. I mean, I'm an adoptive parent. I had fertility issues. I'm blessed that I have 3 girls now through adoption. But my God, like every one of us knows somebody who struggled with these issues. And, I really so admire Jen Aniston for speaking out, because this is someone who, like, these tropes in American society about childlessness have plagued her for years. And she essentially was forced to come out and talk about her experience because she was sort of dragged through the tabloid mud because she was childless, in her early 50s. And then you've got someone in this high position running for vice president of the United States, as you say, like pouring salt on it. Women are not going to stand for it. And look, I think that's what you're seeing in these last few days, like the vastness of the backlash against these kinds of attacks. It's quite something, and it's sort of inspiring. It's not 2016 anymore, right? I mean, I think women are really prepared to fight back in this election in ways that maybe we weren't in 16.
Anthony, I have this political theory based on nothing but my sort of political gut. In 16, a lot of people missed a hidden Trump vote. I think in 2024, there's a hidden male vote in support of a woman's right to choose, a family's right to turn to IVF, a family's right to exist with or without children. And I wonder just anecdotally what you think of that theory.
So let me add some statistics to it, because I think it'll bolster what you're saying. And it is true, it is not 2016 anymore. There are 20.2 million baby boomers that have died since 2016, since that election. Moreover, at the same time, Generation Xers have been onboarded into the voting scrolls to the tune of 40 million, and specifically 8 million of those after the 2022 midterm election. So not only are you right instinctively, but the data shows that. And the sexism and the screeds and the attacks that worked in 2016 that, frankly, baby boomer voters are used to is not something that the Generation Xers or even the Generation Zers have any toleration for. So it'll be a very interesting election. President Trump can't land a punch yet. He's searching verbally through his word salads. He sort of has this Rubik's Cube of word salad. He's trying to find something that's going to land on Vice President Harris. But I'll tell you what, you want to call her dumb as a rock or a DEI candidate, if he keeps doing that, there'll be hundreds of thousands of people waiting online, 10, 12 hours, no water, won't matter. They'll do everything they can to vote for Vice President Harris.
Let me show both of you a little bit of what this phenomenon that Anthony's describing looks like right now. He's landed on wind. Let me play that.
Do you know we need twice as much electricity as we currently have in our country for AI, but the environmentalists won't let you produce it? They want wind. The wind is blowing today. The whole thing is the most expensive hoax in the world. The wind, it kills our birds.
Anthony, I'm going to ask you to explain the head nodding as sort of our resident JD Vance expert. Why is he nodding? That's I mean, anyone alive can understand that that was an idiotic, garbled sentence. Why is JD Vance nodding?
Listen, I don't want to be JD Vance's life coach. I actually want to, I'm watching this implode gloriously, and I'm sorry he doesn't watch your show, but I just got to tell you something. The chemistry between these two people is absolutely horrific. And I just want you to go back to the tape, Nicole. Take 5 minutes of your day and look at his acceptance speech and look at Trump. You know, it looked like he was eating a garbage sandwich in his mouth. And I'm using a euphemism, of course, because we're on the air. But I mean, Trump cannot stand this guy. He wants to know where this like aberrant Care Bear came from. And I can tell you right now, he's lighting up his staff. He's saying, geez, I almost got killed by an assassin's bullet. You guys push this guy on me. He's dull. He's boring. Remember, Trump is an actor and a casting director. And Vance is not helping him. And here's the dirty secret that we all know. Vance thinks he's way smarter than Trump. You know, Trump hates that. And Vance thinks that this is his 2028 presidential tour. And Donald Trump fires people that get more attention than him. Trust me on that. I know that. He fires people that get more attention.
You know, I mean, Lauren, it brings us back to the general election matchup, which has only come into focus the last 4 days. And Vice President Kamala Harris is going to get more attention. Vice President Kamala Harris gives better speeches. Vice President Kamala Harris will, if she isn't already, have bigger crowds for the duration. Your thoughts and your furthering of your comment in that Times story that he will not be able to control himself in how he reacts to that.
Yeah, I mean, JD Vance may have been catering to what he thought Tucker Carlson's audience wanted to hear, but Donald Trump is sincere in his anger and disdain for women. I mean, we've seen that from the beginning. I mean, we've had, years and years of this. He abhors women journalists. He berated and insulted one of the very few women that he had in his own cabinet, Elaine Chao. And by the way, he had historically the lowest number of women in his cabinet of any president since Ronald Reagan. He has a totally regressive, misogynistic view of women, and he has sexually assaulted them. So this is not somebody who has ever shown any interest in moderating when it came to speaking honestly about what he really thinks when he goes head to head with women. And I think it's not going to work this time. I've been thinking a lot about these last few days, and I've always thought that politics, candidates winning often comes down to the right person in the right time and place, the right moment, and the right race. And it certainly feels like that for the vice president, that, maybe a few days earlier, a couple months earlier, certainly years earlier, it might not have resonated in the way that it does now. But what she's galvanizing is not just the relief and the desire of Democrats to unite after this very painful, couple weeks of trying to sort out the president's future, but also, the women who are passionately committed to not going further back, to making sure that they stop Trump from ever being elected again. And frankly, in some ways, from getting right what we got wrong in 2016 and not allowing some of the sexism that derailed Hillary's campaign, which didn't just come from Donald Trump, it also came from the media and other places. It was pre-Me Too in 2016. But I think there's a real coalescing around this sense, we're not going back, and we're not going to let the same old take down a highly qualified extraordinary, potentially once in a generation, history-making candidate.
I think that is so true. Lauren, I want to ask both of you to come back and have this conversation, because I think you feel it for yourself, right? You feel it as people who've lived through and survived one Trump term. You feel it when you watch him unrepentant and doubling down in a deposition in the belief that grabbing women between the legs is something you can do when you're famous, and they've, quote, done it for a million years. You feel it in these sort of unanswered misogynistic attacks that are repeated on the campaign trail, and you feel it in the selection of JD Vance, someone who thinks that women should stay in marriages that are violent and abusive and unhappy. So to both of you, thank you so much for starting us off today, and to be continued. Thank you so much.